Hello and welcome to another Leica review. Today I want to talk about the Leica philosophy. See, it has been often said that less is more. So what does that mean when less is more? When you take out all the things that have nothing to do with photography in a camera, then you can say less is more. But let's look at what that really means. You see, if you have, for example, no autofocus, that means you're going to manually focus. Is that a better thing? Well, that is the philosophy that Leica is trying to push, saying that if you're using, for example, like an M camera, that you are going to do more because the camera offers less. And I often think about the implications of that. Let's say if you're trying to focus on a subject with f1.4, a Simulux that you paid almost $8,000, are you going to be able to nail that focus? Similarly, if you're using Noctilux at 0.95, would you have the luxury of being able to fine-tune your camera to capture that fine detail, to ensure that you have attained the accurate focus? Because you see, on that little tiny screen, you're not often sure that the photograph is in focus. It may look like in focus, but when you take it onto your computer screen, find out that the eye is out of focus and that your actual focus is the nose or the cheek. Now that changes things. You see, we want to spend that much money and buy a Noctilux, and we want to make sure that we can use it. See, that is the philosophy that I want to talk about. See, for example, Leica M10 is taking out the video function, so there is no live view function. So what does that mean? That means that if you are going to do that fine focusing on the screen, because your eyesight might not be accurate when you're doing, for example, the rangefinder type of focusing, then it helps. You can magnify it 10 times and see that your focus is very accurate. Otherwise, you will have to use what we call electronic viewfinder. You see, electronic viewfinder means something is more. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is actually more not a good thing? Or could it be a good thing that we are failing to see? I've been a fond user of Leica M240 because it was in the right direction. Like all cameras, it had video features. Leica M10 does not have video feature. Fair enough, you may not be using it, but having it there does not take away from the camera, it adds to the camera. And of course, the absence of live view function causes you not to be able to use that wonderful function of seeing your focus on that screen, the LCD screen, at 10 times the magnification, so that you can actually nail that focus correctly. Similarly, if you are using an adapter, like the Leica R adapter, which I have made a review on, if you put your Leica R lenses on that Leica M body, well, the range coupling doesn't work. So what do? You need an electronic viewfinder. You cannot use the LCD. See, taking away something doesn't always add. Often it subtracts from the camera. I was listening to a lot of people praising, for example, the Leica TL2. I think it's a great camera. It has gone up in megapixels, provides better capabilities, even a 4K video. But have you noticed that they have taken out the flash? Shh, nobody has ever talked about that. Nobody has ever said they have taken out the flash. They have not talked about the fact that there are less features on some cameras, and these features are never mentioned. Even if they're mentioned, they're mentioned in a positive light. See, I like to use the flash if I am in a circumstance where I don't have any available light to back my photography. I may just simply bounce it off the wall or put my hand in front of it and still have some ambient light, or use some kind of a diffuser to be able to use that flash if I see it necessary. Or you may just want to take a photograph in a bright daylight that flash works to compensate for the dark shadows and the contrast. But it's not there. Leica TL2 doesn't have a flash. And I will explain something to you. If you're manufacturing a camera and you take out a vital, important part of it, like the flash, it costs less to produce it. It costs less to produce a Leica M10 if you take out a video capability, considering that everything else being equal. Of course, some may argue that the new sensor costs more, or whatever the case may be. But up until recent time, the price difference between the M240 and the M10 was only $300. And I think that was just simply a marketing strategy. And more importantly, Leica, of course, like all camera manufacturers, wants to sell their stock. And once the stock is done, well, there isn't much to do. See, people have come to me and they have asked me, said, I cannot buy Leica M10. It's been on pre-order. I cannot purchase it. And you go on to some of the big online retailers, there's no M240 available, which makes it almost impossible to find a new camera to buy, even if you are on the market to buy a camera brand new. So what the question is, if you are going to take away from the camera and you're not going to supply the market, and the camera that you have been using and dedicated your efforts into mastering it, all of a sudden becomes obsolete, then what do? Does it actually improve your photography if you are, for example, using a camera with less features? Surely, if you have to know aperture, you have to know the ISO, you have to know a lot of the functions that are fundamentals of photography. Yet, you might find yourself lacking some capabilities if you are, for example, pushed beyond your comfort zones. See, if you are doing street photography and you are using zone photography, that might be very well that you get everything in focus look by using a very wide angle lens. But that doesn't really tend to give you the best of perspective. It doesn't give you a great image just because it was just everything's in focus. In fact, we strive for that bokeh, to give that beautiful out of focus look on the background from the subject, so that it creates the isolation, that our eyes are naturally drawn to that part that is in focus in the picture. So my question to you is, if you got everything else in focus, what is your subject? And how do you define your subject if your camera is incapable of being autofocus? Autofocus has been taunted as something bad. Well, actually, it is not actually bad. Fuji, for example, for years have been producing their cameras that are almost like Leica, with manual apertures, manual settings, and everything else, yet they offer autofocus. They have offered a variety of options if you want to use the viewfinder, if you want to use electronic viewfinder, or the all traditional optical viewfinder. They are both available. So does that make a Fuji a less desirable camera? I tend to not think so. In fact, when you see their lenses priced relatively low compared to other lens manufacturers, and not to mention Leica's, then you might wonder, well, does Fuji offer something that we are not seeing? See, I'm not suggesting that we should switch to Fuji or that we should buy another camera. I'm just suggesting that we look into our cameras and see the pluses and minuses, and perhaps our demands as consumers could shape the way Leica makes decisions and designs cameras. Would it be so wrong if your Leica M had an autofocus system? Or that your camera was able to use a live view function even if you didn't want to use a video capability? So these are little things that make a lot of difference. And for me, for example, using cameras, I see it as tools. If Leica M gives me the advantage of being inconspicuous and I'm able to walk around and take photographs without being seen as somebody intrusive, then that is the aim, that is the achievement that Leica gives me. That's why oftentimes I don't take a DSLR type of camera into a setting where people might be uncomfortable with large, big, bulky cameras. Yet, we must also recognize that there are limitations and compromises that we make when we buy a Leica M camera. And going back to Leica S, like the SL, these are cameras that are relatively different than what the Leica M or Leica Q or Leica TL is. For example, Leica S is a DSLR type of camera. So it is important to recognize that Leica does produce a DSLR type of camera. Leica SL, on the other hand, is a mirrorless camera. So when we are comparing apples to apples, then it makes sense. But when we are comparing apples to oranges, then it's a total different story. Recently, I made a review on one of the Leica SL cameras versus the Sony A9, which you can see in our video section. And somebody said something very interesting. He said it's like McDonald's trying to sell you hamburgers and French fries by giving you free Coke and you're paying $9. See, if you are getting a camera for $5,000-$6,000 from the Leica SL, but you are paying $5,000-$6,000 for the lenses, then it becomes not such a cheap option. And as a professional, I'll ask this question. If you're spending more or at least twice the price for a lens, are you able to get that money back? Also, are you able to differentiate yourself from the rest of the market? I mean, I'm not saying that Sony A9 is a better camera. It may very well have functionalities that may suit a certain user, that sometimes having 20 frames per second is a good thing, or that it offers many capabilities that new other cameras don't have. But does that mean that you will not choose Leica SL? Well, the question always comes down to is what is being offered. Now, we know Leica lenses are incredible, but is it worth the price if you are paying 2 or 3 times the price? And if money is no object, will we still do that and take that route if we had the option? If all things being equal, would you choose Zeiss lenses that Sony has versus the Leica? Because for some people, they might say Zeiss is an older company. They have had more know-how in terms of manufacturing equipments for NASA and microscopes and things long before Leica was ever around. So our question is Zeiss lenses any less inferior to Leica lenses? See, these are questions that I am often thinking about, and I often ask myself if the lens that I'm using is the ideal lens for that circumstances. I love using my Leica Noctilux, yet I ask myself if the Metacon lens that sells for $900 instead of a $10,000 that Noctilux selling for, and I could not tell the difference, or I like the look of a Metacon, would I still spend that much money on getting an Octalux. See, some people make the mistake of thinking that if you buy an expensive lens, you're going to get a better picture. And I tell you this, do a blind test. Look at the photographs from a cheap lens compared to the lens you have, and tell me which one you like better and how you can tell the difference, if you can differentiate it. See, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the lens and the camera and their price tags make you the photographer that you aspire to be. Yet, I know Magnum photographers that have used a smartphone to make their photography books, and they sold pretty good, and the images are quite incredible because they were taking with the right intention, knowing the limitations of the camera and making sure that the images turned out as he would have wanted them to. So the question to you that I pose is less more? Minimalistic approach is often nice, but if it comes at a cost of saving you from the ability to exercise all of your artistic abilities or your creative personality, then you are actually sacrificing for the sake of minimalism. I hope this has been some thoughts that you would want to consider and think about, and perhaps reconsider your decisions when you're making buying decisions. See, people have put down lenses, a lot of lenses from Zeiss and Voigtlander, because of their price tag. But I invite you to look at the different types of lenses that are available for the Leica M. Similarly, look at the lenses that are available from Canon that you can use on the Leica SL. And yet, if you find the difference, and if you see the difference being so important, then buy the lenses for the native mount, which is whether either Leica SL or Leica M or whatever you may choose to do. For me, what counts at the end of the day is what I am getting out of the camera and the lens combination. I personally believe that every photographer can improve his skills and her skills by experimenting. And that's why I invite you to do. Experiment with lenses, try some older Leica lenses, try some new different lenses, and see how they perform for you. And I hope you'll have liked this review, and if you did, press the right button there and subscribe to our channel. And I'll bring you more and more reviews every week. Please do remember to visit us at leicareview.com for our newsletter, where I'll provide you with some great savings on some Leica cameras and lenses. And I thank you for watching.